it's Taylor. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about some of my very favorite books. Reading is one of my favorite pastimes. I try to read as much as I can. I always have a book in my backpack, whether I'm on the train or going to the beach or just sitting at home. But sometimes I find it hard to figure out which book to read next. So hopefully, if you're looking for a good read, this video can be a good resource for you to pick out your next book. So when I read, I like fiction and nonfiction. Fiction books I like to be either suspenseful or super, not drama, but like deep. I like to feel motivated to keep reading when I'm reading fiction. So I feel like the books that I have today to tell you about are exactly that. And then for nonfiction, I like some history, but I also love books that are about learning things, books that can teach me about any kind of subject. Mostly I like reading things about the economy or history or like crime. So a big mix, but mostly I think my biggest thing with books is I just like to stay interested, because for me, I find it really easy to get tired or put a book down and then forget to pick it back up. So all the books that I have today to tell you about and talk to you about are all books that I've read either very quickly or just kept picking back up every time I put them back down. So without further ado, let's start this book club. All right, so the first book is going to be The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is one of my all-time favorite books, and I think a very, very good book to read if you haven't already read it. I've honestly read it twice. I do really enjoy this book, and I think it's a perfect book for someone that might not be super interested in reading, that wants to pick something up, but it follows a shepherd boy through his kind of self-discovery type journey, and it plays into a lot of themes of fear and nature and just overall like self-discovery and learning to, I don't want to give a ton of it away, but it is a quick read. It helped me really during a time when I was right after college reading this. I just felt it was a good resource to kind of help me on the journey that I was on. And it is a quick read. You will love it. Ton of great references. It will be something that you always remember and want to pick back up. So get this one. First book, The Alchemist. Okay, the second book that I just finished recently, which has become one of my all-time favorites as well, is Where the Crawdad Sings by Delia Owens. Sorry, this one doesn't have a book cover. I like to take the covers off to color coordinate my books on the bookshelf. But this book just came out pretty recently, and it is a page turner. I literally couldn't put it down. I will say it is a little slow at the beginning, but once the characters really start to develop, you just keep going and you're turning page after page after page, and you are just playing all the ideas of how it's gonna end in your head. But it has a phenomenal ending. The book overall is great, it has great character development, and it follows like a marsh girl who grows up in the marsh and her relationship with more of like the town, more affluent people, and just being secluded kind of her entire life. So again, without trying to give a lot of it away, it is a really good read, one of my favorite books, and it is just like, has moments of good literature. I don't know, I just feel like it was a good book. I finished it and I was like, love that. So, good book to start. I don't know if I should be like giving you info on the books or like the summary or plot, but mostly this is just like, I'll give you a little review, but these are books that you should read yourself, so I'm not gonna give it all away. The next book, this is probably, I keep saying these are like my all-time favorite books, but this book I seriously love because I feel a little attached to it. So this is The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. This book takes place in Chicago, which is why I feel such an attachment to it. It takes place at the, I believe, 1893 World's Fair that took place in Chicago. The book is actually based on real events and real people. And if you live in Chicago or have been to Chicago or like Chicago, it is a super, super interesting book because it does have a lot of Chicago history in it, particularly relating to architecture. But one thing I really love about this book is it goes chapter by chapter from a different perspective. So it follows two storylines. One is of the sort of main character of the book, H.H. Holmes. So every other chapter follows him and his storyline, while the other chapters follow the Chicago World's Fair development and planning and ups and downs of that, as well as the kind of investigation into Mr. Holmes. So this book is super suspenseful, and like I said, it is more of like a history read too, which is it's nice because it has every other chapter is like suspense and crime versus Chicago history. And since it does take place on real people and real events, you feel like you're really getting a history lesson, but in a really interesting way. Another cool thing about this book is I believe I read somewhere that Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio bought the rights to make this into a movie, which will be super great because it is one of my all-time faves. On the front it says, "Murder, Magic, and the Madness at the Fair That Changed America." A lot of good stuff in this book. You gotta read it. Devil in the White City. All right, when it comes to nonfiction, I really love, like I said, reading books that I can learn things from, not necessarily just like biographies or anything like that. I don't really know how to describe these books, but one of my all-time favorite, these are all some of my all-time favorites, which is why I'm making a video about it. But one of my favorite authors is an author named Malcolm Gladwell. He is an economist, I believe, which is what I studied in college. Economics. I really love Malcolm Gladwell's books because it gives you a better understanding of why the world sometimes operates the way it does. So in The Tipping Point, it's how little things can make a big difference, and it goes into a lot of case studies about how things get to the tipping point of where they become either an epidemic, a pandemic, or just turn into what they end up being. And there's always a point where that kind of flips. And so it goes into the economics of that, and that's a tipping point. There's a lot of other books I have read all of them, by Malcolm Gladwell. The other one I have here is Blink, which is also really good. He has a book called David and Goliath, and it's just really good, informative reading. I feel like I always leave learning stuff and learning how and wanting to make better choices as they pertain to my everyday life and the world and things like that. I am also not a super literature person, so I'm probably doing a horrible job at summarizing these books and giving you a good idea of what they're about, but just take my word for it that they are good and read them, and then you'll understand. So back to nonfiction. Like I said earlier, some of my favorite books that I like to read are super suspenseful or crime related, or books that you just keep turning the page because you have to know what happens next. And an author that is really, 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 really good at doing that is Sherry Lapina. This book, An Unwanted Guest, is one of my favorites. So good. Literally you will finish it in a day if you're a quick reader. If you're a slow reader, 4 days. Me, Jeff, and Jeff's mom all love reading this author, so it's fun to kind of talk to each other about her books. She is, I believe, from New York, and so a lot of her books take place in upstate New York or the suburbs of New York, which is really cool. One of them takes place in the Catskills, which if you follow me on Instagram, you know I love to go there as much as I can. But these books are super suspenseful, good page turners, and you just can't put them down, and those are the kinds of books that I love. The one thing I will say about nonfiction versus fiction is, although it's a good read and I love reading them and they bring a lot of feelings in the moment, I don't take away a ton from these types of books. They're kind of more just fun reads. But if you're looking for just a good experience for however long you're reading the book, it's good. Versus something as where the Crawdad sings, I really took a lot away from that and felt something after it. But nonetheless, these are phenomenal books. Sherry Lapina is the greatest suspenseful writer that I've read. If you have any other suggestions on those types of books, please let me know because I would love to pick up some new ones. And last, but absolutely not least, one of my favorite books of all time that is literally just, I can't even put it into words, is A Little Life This is the maybe greatest book of all time by Hanya Yanagihara. I probably butchered that, I'm sorry. But this book is like, I read this book when I first moved to New York, which was great because it follows a group of 4 guys throughout their adolescence to like their middle age, and it kind of follows their friendship and how all of their lives develop. And it does not like, it's not all nice. It really follows like the realities that some people face and how like difficult life can be for different groups of people. And it is just like I've cried more times reading this book than I have cried at anything ever, probably. I've cried more times at this book than I've cried probably my entire life. This book is gut-wrenching, it is heart-wrenching, it just makes you feel every emotion you can possibly feel. You just have to read this book at some point in your life. I would read it when you have the emotional capacity to read something like this, and you have the time to cry, and you have the time to really get into your feelings when reading this, because otherwise it's just gonna like terrorize the rest of your daily life. I would like take this book to the park and read, and then I would like start bawling in the park, and I'd have to like go home and look like I just got beat up in the park. But this is, I think this, let me see, it's like over 800 pages, I know, 816 pages, but it is worth it. This is the longest I've ever read a book. It took me forever, just because there were times when it got so emotional that I had to put it down for a little bit. It actually like made me very emotional and got me into some very dark places, but overall it's like one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and I highly recommend it to anyone who has the emotional capacity to read something like this. So, one of the best books of all time, and the last book on the list today is A Little Life. All right, guys, thank you for watching my first book recommendation. They weren't necessarily book reviews. They are books that I've read that I absolutely love, that I feel very passionate about recommending to anyone looking for a next book to read. If you have any suggestions on your favorite books, I would love to see what they are. So leave a comment and let me know, and maybe we'll start a little book club. But thank you guys again for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, comment your favorite books below, and let me know if you've read any of the books that I recommended, because I would love to hear your thoughts on them as well. And that's it. Goodbye.